Three people have been arrested for allegedly stealing trade secrets from Taiwanese chip giant TSMC. The U.S.'s latest drone delivery marks the fastest arms delivery to Taiwan in nearly 2 decades. For the first time, Taiwanese representatives attend memorial services marking the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Plus, recovery efforts in central and southern Taiwan resume as heavy rain finally begins to calm. Hello, and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Prosecutors have raided the Taiwan office of Japanese company Tokyo Electron, according to the Financial Times. It's part of an investigation into the alleged theft of trade secrets from Taiwan's chip giant TSMC. In a statement to TaiwanPlus, TSMC acknowledged the case has been passed on to prosecutors, but declined to give any further details. The prosecutor's office would not comment on the report. For more on what this case could mean for the AI industry in Taiwan and globally, Chris Gorin spoke to tech industry analyst Dave Nicholson of the Futurum Group.
So Dave, as you know, 3 people have been detained for allegedly stealing trade secrets related to chip giant TSMC's technology and possibly violating the National Security Act. I just want to start with getting your reaction to the case.
Shocking, surprising, while at the same time, if anyone had asked probably you or myself, is something like this likely to happen, we would have said, oh yeah, of course. I think it'll be really interesting as details emerge.
Neither TSMC nor the prosecutor's office have said publicly which technology was at risk of being stolen here. But if I can ask you to speculate just a little bit, what kind of tech do you think the alleged thieves might have been after?
Well, we would assume that the most valuable technology would be the most likely to target. But then that would be an assumption. The assumption is 2 nanometer is what folks are going after. And that, we're in the middle of a global, we call it a Cold War, but it's a war for AI dominance. TSMC is the holder of the most valuable information on the latest generation technology that's going to support AI. Because when you think about this, there's sort of 2 vectors that are involved, and it'll be interesting to see how they converge. There's the question of, are there state actors involved or not, that are looking at this as sort of part of this arms race, the global Cold War for AI. You would think they'd be going after the crown jewels, 2 nanometer. On the other hand, if it's simply commercial, if it's simply highly organized crime, they could be going after anything that will make them money. I think that my bet is that I won't make a bet. I think it's easy to assume it's 2 nanometer, but I don't think we know yet.
The Financial Times and others have reported that the Taiwan offices of the Japanese company Tokyo Electron have also been raided. Did that come as a surprise to you?
The natural assumption on a lot of people's part would be, oh, it's got to be China. It's mainland China. Clearly, they're in there. They steal intellectual property all the time. That's all they do, right? That's the cliche. Well, guess what? There are a lot of other folks who can profit from this kind of technology. And there are quite a few state actors who see this as strategically important, not necessarily in the military sense, but in an economic sense. So could we draw a conclusion that maybe there is Japanese government somehow involvement in this? At this point, that's all spy novel speculation. Does the company itself have something to do with this? I think that's a little bit more reasonable to speculate, but then who knows what they could be the front for? Think about a really, really good way to hide your tracks. Well, you don't hide your tracks by having the breadcrumb trail lead directly to your doorstep.
Given the national security and economic stakes you're talking about, do you think that this case is going to lead to a big wave of increased security measures across the industry?
It should. Yeah, I hope so. They're all, this is, again, we're all shocked, but no one is surprised. And yeah, I would say that if I am the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer in a company, I'm probably not getting a lot of sleep tonight. I'm probably going to be up early tomorrow morning, and it's it's drill time, it's audit time.
That was Dave Nicholson of the Futurum Group. U.S. President Donald Trump says an investigation leading to special U.S. tariffs on semiconductors could conclude as early as next week. The tariffs would be issued under a law known as Section 232. They would be separate from the 20% reciprocal tariffs on most Taiwanese goods announced last week. Trump also said that TSMC would invest $300 billion in its facilities in the U.S. state of Arizona, nearly double their initial pledge of $165 billion made in March. TSMC declined to comment to TaiwanPlus about Trump's remarks. Taiwan has been buying more high-tech weapons from the U.S., including nearly 300 advanced attack drones last year. These weapons are essential for asymmetric warfare, and as Alan Liu reports, the first batch has now arrived.
Hitting targets and surveilling the air. These drones could be Taiwan's next big step in weapons advancement. The country has just received its first batch of OTS-600M attack drones from the US. Technology that can fly for up to 4 hours, travel hundreds of kilometers, resist electronic attacks, and even carry anti-tank missiles.
它的弹头比早期的像弹簧刀300一类的产品要大，所以它是可以有效的对付重型的装甲车辆，比方说战车、步兵战斗车这一类的目标。那对台湾而言，这是相对实用的。
As Taiwan faces growing military pressure from China, the country in recent years has been buying more drones to boost its asymmetric warfare capabilities. It even plans to procure nearly 50,000 indigenous drones by 2027. But adding more drones into the military's arsenal is just the beginning. Analysts say more needs to be done.
部队需要去建立它的作战概念，就是我们必须要把它真正融入未来我们对战场的想象里面，它应该要扮演什么样的角色，这个必须要研发出来，需要建立相关的 doctrine， 然后需要采购足够的数量之外，我们也需要制度的配合。
This shipment marks the fastest U.S. arms delivery to Taiwan in almost 20 years. A big win, given the billions of U.S. dollars worth of weapons still on back order. And Taiwan isn't stopping there. Officials say they're considering buying another 1,000 drones. Defense Minister Wellington Koo says the OTS-700 is one option on the table.
这个 Artis 600之外他们也会有精进这个700的部分，Artis 700。那我们也会按照我们的这个联合战力的规划，如果预算可以的话，我们就会来适时的筹获。
Taiwan has been stepping up military cooperation with the U.S. A new congressional report says Washington is open more security channels, like drawdown authority and foreign military financing, meaning drone deals like this one could become routine. Dolphin Chen and Alan Liu for TaiwanPlus.
For the first time, Taiwanese representatives are joining memorial services for the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings 8 decades ago ushered in the atomic age and hastened the fall of the Japanese Empire, bringing an end to Japan's colonial rule here in Taiwan. Brent Thomas reports from Hiroshima.
At 2:45 in the morning, August 6, 1945, Colonel Tibbets takes the Enola Gay down the runway into the air, beginning the 6.5-hour flight to Japan. The Enola Gay begins the bomb run. The bomb is dropped.
80 years ago, at about 8:15 in the morning, the people of Hiroshima saw a blinding flash in the sky. An atomic bomb dropped by the United States exploded about 600 meters above where I'm standing right now.
投下され、一瞬にして当たり前の日常が消えました。誰なのかわからないぐらい皮膚がただれた人々。 涙とともに止まらない絶望の声
On the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombing, Taiwanese representatives are joining the annual Peace Memorial Ceremony for the first time ever. This event, held every year since 1947, honors the roughly 140,000 victims of the 1945 bombing and calls for a world free of nuclear weapons. Taiwan has never officially been included in this ceremony, despite its connection to Japan's wartime history. Taiwan was part of the Japanese Empire at the time, and while records are incomplete, historians estimate around 2,000 Taiwanese were killed at Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
It took until 2008, actually, for Taiwanese, and I think any kind of non-Japanese, to have their medical records assessed outside of Japan. They also had to provide documentation of being within the bomb blast area, and that was quite difficult for them to provide decades after the incident.
And while Taiwan's role in Japanese history may often be overlooked, events like this are important in determining its future. Taiwan's ambassador to Japan, Lee Yi-young, was seen shaking hands and talking with his American counterpart, George Glass. And still, while Taiwan's presence here is significant, the somber processions are a reminder that nuclear war leaves no nation untouched.
軍縮をめぐる国際社会の分断は深まり、現下の安全保障環境は一層厳しさを増しています。
80 years later, Taiwan's presence at this ceremony reflects a broader truth, that the impact of Hiroshima spans generations and crosses borders. Even today, nuclear weapons remain at the center of global tensions, with world leaders, including US President Donald Trump, invoking them in threats just days ago. For people gathered here, that's exactly why this ceremony still matters. Ryan Wu, Jeffrey Chen, and Bryn Thomas in Hiroshima for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's economy ministry says it is reviewing new regulations banning indirect imports of Chinese cars. That's after reports that Chinese EV manufacturer BYD plans to enter Taiwan's auto market by assembling vehicles in Thailand and selling through a local Taiwanese agent. Direct imports of Chinese cars are currently banned in Taiwan, and vehicles with Chinese components must meet strict localization guidelines. The ministry is reviewing regulations intended to address safety and national security concerns while protecting Taiwan's automobile industry. It expects to announce the new rules by the end of the year. For more on the regulation of Chinese vehicles and what we can expect going forward, Izzy Wells spoke with Zhang Mingyan, the Deputy Director of Economic Security at the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology.
So what are the biggest concerns here if BYD's electric vehicles were allowed to enter Taiwan's market via a third party?
I would say cybersecurity concerns and national security concerns. We all know that EV is relying on a bunch of chips, including the camera chips. And these chips could be used easily for the surveillance purpose. So first of all, we cannot guarantee that Chinese region or CCP, they have no intention to have more surveillance tactics on Taiwanese people. And also, according to the Chinese domestic law legal system, Chinese citizens, all the private sectors, actors, they have the obligation to provide all the information that needed by their government for the national security purpose.
Is this a loophole distributing via third parties that has been explored before by Chinese companies?
I mean, in Taiwan, we actually don't allow most of the commodities imported from China. As you say, they may use some third-party entities or third-party country to transship their product into Taiwan. But in terms of the finished product, like BYD, it's like a big car, a big EV. And it is very easy to identify whether there are some illegal transshipment from the third party. And so I think on this level, it is not a big concern. But what would be the concerns is include something like components or even like chips. And somehow, under certain conditions, it is allowed, it is illegal to use the chips or the component from China.
Now, with these regulations under review, how likely actually is it that these BYD vehicles will actually be allowed to enter Taiwan?
So according to my understanding, the Taiwanese government now their attitude is they don't want this to happen. In terms of the current legal systems, our MOEA, they have the authority to prevent these imports, include BYD or the other electronics vehicles from importing from China to Taiwan. But if our legislative yuan, if they want to proceed this agenda, it is likely that maybe KMT or TPP, these two parties, they could have the new bills or new proposals to legalize this shipment or transshipment.
That was Jiaming Yan at the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology. It's been a month since Typhoon Danas made landfall in Taiwan, and then last week, another storm front hit. As the rain finally begins to calm, recovery in central and southern Taiwan resumes. As Irene Lin reports, displaced residents and farmers in hard-hit Tainan have the grit to face the long road ahead.
Construction crews work to hold together what's left of this rural house after a midnight downpour hollowed out its foundation. It's just one of the tragedies to befall Tainan in the aftermath of Tropical Storm Komei, which later strengthened into a full typhoon. Mrs. Chiu has lived here for the past 4 decades with her family and only recently paid off the mortgage. She says she was almost caught in the landslide.
这个车库怎么在震动？好像要崩了呢！赶快，我想要去拿钥匙来开车啊，把车子开出来啊！好像要崩下去呢！在考虑的当下，是要冲去拿钥匙，还是要怎么样？然后我在考虑的当下，它就崩下去了。还有昨天晚上也是，还有听到那个房子的铁的拉锯的声音啊，哔啊！哇，真的是不敢住啊！
It's been a week since Komei dumped over 2,000 millimeters of rain into Tainan, shutting down school and work for nearly a week at the end of July. Just a month ago, Typhoon Danas brought high winds, blowing off rooftops and toppling utility poles. Mrs. Cho says the house was still intact after the typhoon, but the heavy rainfall set off a series of landslides, taking a chunk of her house with them. She says the family still hopes to rebuild there one day. In the meantime, the government has arranged temporary lodgings for 5 days, but no one promises anything after that.
再下来，我们只好在这边先搭帐篷，站之后怎么办呢？因为一家8口要移迁也是有点困难，所以现在也是很烦恼，不晓得接下来我们一家8口要去哪里啊。
Damage left behind by the storms is also obvious in the country's Pomelo heartland. August in Maodou district was supposed to be the harvest season. But as local farmer Chen Mingzhi explains, an unprecedented amount of the crop this year was lost, stripped away when the typhoon hit. The past week of downpours also put a heavy burden on the farm's drainage system. He says without it, tree roots would spoil, killing hundreds of the pomelo trees that he's taken care of for 2 decades.
像我的部分大概将近80%啊，是从来没有遇过这么强的。因为这次的台风它进来，直接就是从我们台湾海峡进来啊，从西半部啊，没有经过我们台湾的那个护国神山的阻挡啊，所以直接就等于说当面就从我们的正面就打下去了啊。
With Mid-Autumn Festival approaching, the peak season for pomelos, Chen keeps his spirits high and stays confident in the quality of his now modest harvest.
台风刚好是真的是把我们上半部的打掉，而留下来这些下半部的，就是我们台湾话讲看嫩威那个它的果实就比较不会被打下来，它的品质反而更好所以我讲天公伯啊，佮对阮袂歹，佮留一寡上好的福源。
In the coastal district of Qigu, all residents in these historic red brick houses have been evacuated, leaving behind wreckage that volunteers here say will take months to fix. Many of the residents here are elderly people living alone.
那有一些老人家就是他们就是觉得肉会归根，他们不想要到其他的子女那边去住，因为他们觉得这边一辈子了。
After hearing these resident stories, volunteers have joined in to help the local community rebuild and give those living here a roof over their heads. With the storm front having moved on, Tainan locals here are using the next few days of hopefully milder weather to restore these houses, hopefully to build up their defenses before the next big storm. Patrick Chen, Chris Ma, and Irene Lin in Tainan for TaiwanPlus.
Efforts to crack down on scammers here in Taiwan often leave migrant workers behind. A rights group is sounding the alarm and has gotten some lawmakers on its side. But as John Van Trieste reports, campaigners say there's a lot to do.
A new survey released today at the legislature shows that when migrant workers come to Taiwan, they don't just face a language barrier and the other ordinary challenges of a new life in an unfamiliar country. This survey suggests they're also at high risk from scammers. The survey of migrant workers by NGO Trans-Asia Sisters Association Taiwan found 30% of migrant workers have encountered a scam here, with around half that number saying they fell for it. These scams take many forms, including the typical online shopping and romance scams that have become a problem for Taiwanese people as well. But there are also people out there ready to exploit the special vulnerabilities migrant workers have. One researcher behind the survey says some scammers offer to introduce high-paying jobs for a fee, only to run off with the money. And then there are people who pretend to be the police or a government agency to extort people.
只要有人一说，我其实是移民署来的，或者是我是那个劳动部的官员，然后讲话就是很有自信的时候，很多移民移工就相信了。这其实有一个很大的漏洞，就是政府是缺席的，所以他的名字被诈骗者当成是一个很好的诈骗工具。
Another researcher says the system as it stands now, with migrant workers unable to change employers and tempted to work illegally, creates conditions ripe for scammers to exploit. She also says migrant workers have little information about their rights or ways to flag abuse in their own languages.
我们的网站基本上中文，即便现在你去问移民署，他们一定或者相关部会一定说我们有多语翻译。可是你们知道那多语翻译有多瞎吗？瞎到就是母语人看不懂。
Two lawmakers are here to say this must stop and that the government must step in. They say foreign language support and solutions for migrant workers' practical needs, especially for sending money back home, are key.
有没有能考虑能够提供合法的汇兑？用 APP 不见得一定要用我们的银行来做。那当然，我们也要针对这个语言的界面服务的时间呢，好能够去考虑到这些人的需求。
The activists gathered here have 4 demands based on the survey results. They want more channels for multilingual information. They want closer work with NGOs migrant workers trust. They want an easier way for migrant workers to flag scammers. And they say the government should improve working conditions that see some workers flee their employers and become vulnerable to scammers as they do illegal jobs. The presence of lawmakers here today suggests that the report has the ears of at least some in the government. The migrant rights workers activists hope that this will bring their 4 demands forward. Hank Xu and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwanese artists are performing at a cultural event in Osaka. We Taiwan is being held alongside Expo 2025, and it aims to showcase the country's culture to the world. Sandy Chi went to the Japanese city to meet one of the troops.
Depicting the return of freedom of speech to Taiwan, these performers are showcasing a part of Taiwan's democratic journey. This piece is called Showfeet, the Electric Divine Generals, a performance by Taiwan's artistic troupe, battered, one of the groups performing at We Taiwan in Osaka. Battered's performances aim to represent a distinctive Taiwanese aesthetic through contemporary dance, sound, fashion, and folk singing. Unlike other troupes, these artists have a clear mission. They came together in 2018, 4 years after Taiwan's Sunflower Movement, when hundreds of young people stormed the legislature to oppose a government trade agreement with China.
其实我们对于文化的转型正义跟国家认同，其实有蛮大的使命跟理解哦，所以当时才有做一个团体，就是做针对的是台湾文化的转型正义来做创作为主。
因为加入了平场，我才开始比较了解有关台湾近代史一些先烈们的故事。那原本它距离我生活很遥远，那我开始了解之后才知道，为什么我会成为现在的自己。
And here in Osaka, these performers hope to encourage discussion about transitional justice, a major part of Taiwan's road to democracy.
运用到了台湾真实的民间信仰，以及就是真的有涉及到所谓的转型正义议题的表演团队。那因为这两个其实是一个极端，因为民间信仰就是神明的事情，其实是开心的、喜庆的。可是台湾的转型正义其实是比较灰暗的，然后比较隐晦的，甚至到现在都还有一部分台湾人想要刻意回避的。
And the intricacies of the performance are a nod to Taiwan's democracy.
神将身上的灯光变化会由女舞者去来驱动，以这样的灯光驱动，其实它就是一个沟通。那台湾其实是一个很新的民主国家，那什么是最宝贵的？就是自由。所以这个灯光的沟通，它其实象征了光明跟神圣之外，其实还有一个就是言论自由的关联。
Some Taiwanese living in Japan say performances like this are essential to showing others how Taiwan came to be how it is today.
我们在介绍其他国家人说，我们台湾在民主这一步，不是从以前这么的制度化，而是我们变得越来越活性化，从过去的东西包含现在新的东西去结合在一起，然后让全世界人都看到更多的台湾的画面。
Showing that performance can do more than just entertain. This troupe is telling the story of silenced voices as Taiwan continues on its democratic journey. Devon Tai, PG Zhuang, and Sanny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, let's go back to Japan, where children's choirs are singing the Hiroshima peace song on the 80th anniversary of the atomic bombings. I'm Eric Gao. Take care.